For a long time, the idea of certain players getting traded in the NBA seemed impossible. But in recent months, it's become pretty impossible to rule anything out. What are the most unbelievable NBA trade scenarios that could actually happen? Let's find out. Let's kick things off with something most people probably would never imagine. LeBron James to the Warriors? Nobody saw Luka Doncic getting traded, so at this point, why not go all in the chaos? With Luka Doncic now a Laker, the franchise may start thinking long-term, especially since both Doncic and LeBron are ball-dominant playmakers. The Warriors, on the other hand, have been searching for a move to extend their championship window, and pairing LeBron with Steph Curry would be the ultimate win-now move. LeBron's still elite, but he's not getting any younger. Sure, it sounds crazy, but after what just happened, can we really say anything is off the table? Golden State could put together a package centered around Andrew Wiggins and Jonathan Kuminga, throw in some picks and make it happen. Oh, and just for fun, the Warriors could acquire Bronny James too. LeBron could take the opportunity to play alongside his son before retirement. Would this trade actually happen? Probably not. But after the Mavericks shocked the world, there are no rules anymore. That's why De'Aaron Fox moving to the Spurs might actually fly. The Kings were already open to trading their star guard, and now, after watching the Mavericks pull off the unthinkable, anything feels possible. Fox is one of the fastest players in the NBA, a clutch shot maker, and exactly the kind of player who could elevate Victor Wembanyama's game to terrifying levels. The Spurs have been looking for a long-term solution at point guard, and while Chris Paul has been a solid veteran presence, he's more of a temporary fix. Fox, on the other hand, is just 27, in his prime, and fits perfectly with Wemby's timeline. The idea of those two playing together should have Spurs fans very excited, and opposing defenses absolutely horrified. Of course, it wouldn't come cheap. The Kings would probably ask for a young player like Stephon Castle or Devin Vassell, but San Antonio has a mountain of draft picks to play with. Throw in Keldon Johnson, Zach Collins, Blake Wesley, and a bunch of picks, and suddenly the Kings have a package they can't ignore. Fox would instantly turn the Spurs into a serious playoff contender, while Sacramento would reshape its future with assets. Given how wild this trade deadline has already been, don't be surprised if Fox ends up in a Spurs jersey sooner rather than later. Next up, let's talk about Jimmy Butler getting traded to the Suns. Oh, now that's some drama just waiting to happen. The Heat have been dancing around a Butler trade for weeks, and after suspending him multiple times, it's clear things are getting messy. Enter the Phoenix Suns, a team who really needs toughness, defense, and a leader who's willing to do the dirty work. Sounds like a match made in basketball chaos. Bradley Beal heading to Miami is interesting. Sure, injuries and a tough fit have kept him from thriving at Phoenix, but he's still a go-getter. If the Heat wants to stay competitive while moving on from Butler, Beal is one of the few players out there with a comparable talent level. The dude can still hoop when healthy, and in Miami's system, he might just find his feet again. For the Pistons, this is all about collecting some extra picks and getting involved as the third wheel. They grabbed Josh Richardson and some second-rounders, which, hey, isn't flashy, but it's solid business for a rebuilding squad. As for the Suns, this move signals that they're all in on winning now. Butler would bring defensive grit and intensity, something Phoenix desperately needs alongside Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. If this ever happens, expect the Suns to get a lot tougher and a whole lot more interesting come playoff time. Speaking of interesting, how about Joel Embiid to the Thunders? That would definitely send shockwaves through the league. OKC has been hoarding draft picks for a while, and if they're ever going to cash in, what better way than snagging a reigning MVP? To be honest, this deal would be painful for the Sixers. Embiid has been the heart and soul of Philly, but let's be real, his injuries and the team's inability to break through in the playoffs have led to some serious frustration. In return, they get a solid package of defensive dogs in Lou Dort and Isaiah Hartenstein, plus some young talent and draft picks to retool around Tyrese Maxey. It's not a perfect trade, but if Philly ever decides to hit reset, this is a strong way to do it. As for the Thunder, pairing Embiid with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, that's a nightmare for the rest of the league. SGA already looks like an MVP candidate. Chet Holmgren is one of a kind, and adding Embiid gives them an elite post presence who can dominate when healthy. The only problem, can Embiid stay on the floor? If he does, OKC just turned themselves into serious contenders overnight. That sounds pretty crazy, but you'll probably have the same reaction if Kevin Durant ever gets traded to the Rockets. Now that's some serious plot twist. Houston has been gathering young talent like they're building a dynasty in NBA 2K. But what if they hit fast forward and grab one of the greatest scorers ever? The Phoenix Suns will acquire Dillon Brooks, Cam Whitmore, Jabari Smith Jr., Steven Adams, 2 first-round picks, 3 second-round picks, while the Houston Rockets will acquire Kevin Durant. At first glance, it sounds insane. Durant in a Rockets jersey after all those years of going against Houston in the playoffs? But think about it. The Suns are pretty much stuck in neutral. Their super team experiment isn't working, and they desperately need depth and future assets. Jabari Smith Jr. and Cam Whitmore give them young, exciting building blocks. Dillon Brooks brings defense and toughness, and they finally revive their draft capital. Meanwhile, the Rockets, they're already ahead of schedule. But adding KD instantly puts them in the contender conversation. Imagine Alfred Sengun and Jalen Green running the floor with Durant lurking on the perimeter, ready to torch defenses. It's a bold move, but sometimes the biggest risks brings the biggest rewards. Moving on. You've probably never thought about Bruce Brown heading back to Detroit, but with what's been happening recently, why not keep the madness going? And let's be real, Bruce Brown moving back to Detroit is a move that actually makes sense. For the Pistons, it could be exactly what they need. This team has been stuck in rebuild mode for what feels like forever, and it's time to bring in some veterans who actually know how to win. Brown was an important part of Denver's championship run, a defensive menace who does all the little things that don't show up in the box score. Pair him with Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey, and suddenly Detroit's backcourt has some real grit. For the Raptors, though, this is all about the future. They swapped Brown for Simone Fontecchio, a promising shooter, plus Wendell Moore Jr., and a second-round pick. It's not a blockbuster, but it adds depth and flexibility as they continue to reshape their roster. Is this the trade that turns the NBA upside down? No. But for a young Pistons team desperate to take the next step, bringing back a guy like Brown could be the kind of underrated move that makes a real difference. And that's pretty much the same thing with Davion Mitchell landing in Orlando. The Magic have built an identity around size, defense, and gritty play, but they're still figuring out their backcourt. Jalen Suggs has been banged up, Markelle Fultz is inconsistent, and adding Mitchell gives them a persistent on-ball defender who can hound opposing guards for 94 feet. He's not an offensive juggernaut, but in a system where Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner dominate the scoring, that's not a deal-breaker. This is more about asset management for the Raptors. Mitchell doesn't seem to be a permanent fit, and Toronto gets a veteran in Gary Harris who, let's be real, is likely just a salary filler in this deal. The real prize? A couple of second-rounders that could either be used to add young talent or flip down the line. Harris's contract expires soon, meaning the Raptors keep their books clean while stockpiling picks. And if you think that last trade was a stretch, let's take things up a notch. Zach LaVine to the Raptors. Yeah, Toronto hasn't been exactly throwing itself into the superstar trade market, but at some point, they need to address their lack of shot creation. LaVine, for all his flaws, is a high-level scorer who could instantly help a Raptors team that struggled to put points on the board. The price? Grady Dick, Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk, and Davion Mitchell. Basically a mix of youth, depth, and contracts that make the money work. Chicago, meanwhile, finally presses the reset button, bringing in a promising shooter in Dick, a defensive-minded guard in Mitchell, and 2 veterans in Brown and Olynyk, who could either contribute or be traded later. Meanwhile, this isn't a no-brainer for Toronto. LaVine's contract is hefty. We're talking almost $95 million over the next 2 seasons if he picks up his player option, and he's had injury concerns. But if the Raptors want to accelerate their retooling instead of drifting into mediocrity, adding a proven scorer could be worth the gamble. Plus, they get to look at Talen Horton-Tucker and Julian Phillips, 2 young players with intriguing upside. Now, let's wrap things up with this final scenario. Jakob Poeltl to the Warriors. Golden State's dynasty isn't dead yet, but it's running out of steam. Steph Curry is still playing at an elite level, but the Warriors need more size, defense, and playmaking to stay competitive in a brutal Western Conference. This guy is a steady, defensive-minded center who would give them much-needed rim protection and rebounding. Alongside him, Davion Mitchell brings perimeter defense, and Jamison Battle is a young prospect with upside. Of course, a deal like this is pretty expensive. Toronto would land Jonathan Kuminga, a 22-year-old athletic freak with untapped potential, plus Kevin Looney, Gary Payton II, and Guy Santos for depth. The real prize? A 2028 first-round pick, which could be a major asset if the Warriors fall off post-Curry. There's a big question, though. Would the Warriors actually part with Kuminga, one of their best young pieces? That's debatable. But if they believe Pirtle is the missing piece for another playoff push, it's not out of the realm of possibility. Meanwhile, Toronto gets a promising wing, solid role players, and a valuable future pick fueling their retooling efforts around Scotty Barnes. Wild? Maybe. Impossible? Not in today's NBA. There you have it. Unbelievable NBA trade scenarios that could happen. Which of these scenarios do you think is most likely to happen? Let us know in the comment section and enjoy our other videos.